Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name's Luke, and I am joined from New York, Niyaz Ahmed. And I think I got your first name wrong, so I apologize.
Niyaz Ahmed.
Niyaz Ahmed. It's great having you on the show. Welcome. You are making the trip from New York, down to the Pittsburgh area for 247 Fighting Championships Brawl in the Burgh 12. The first time they will be at the Meadows Casino, which is really exciting. And you're a pro fighter. You're going to be taking on the local guy, Justin, the General Patton. So let's get to know you a little bit more. Thanks so much for coming on the show. You went pro in 2021, so only 2 years of going pro. How's that been for you so far?
It actually hasn't been a year yet. I just went pro in November 2021, like 6-7 months.
Gotcha. I apologize. I saw the 2021 and thought that was more of a 2 year, but you're right. It's 6 months. So in 6 months, you've had 3 fights. You've won 1, lost 2. You had another one canceled, and I'm sure there's several more that have been canceled. So it looks like you're trying to stay busy. This will be your 4th fight in well under a year of going pro. And what's the plan behind taking all those fights in your first year?
I might look into a title shot by the end of this year when all goes well down the line. Okay.
So staying busy with the purpose of maybe getting a title shot, getting your record up and running.
God willing.
What led you, and this is different for everybody. I know I looked at your record on Tapology, and I saw that you had probably close to 10 amateur fights, something like that. Some guys
11.
11? Okay.
Yeah.
So what led you to the point where you're like, okay, I can go pro? When did you know you were good to go pro, and kind of what made you think that prior to going pro in November?
Well, I've had a title shot in the amateurs about a year and some change ago, and like March 2021, and I lost that fight because the guy held me down for 5 rounds. It was in Florida.
Okay.
And, I fractured my foot early into round 1, and then I had like one more fight after that. I broke that guy's ribs into very early into round 1, and think I hit him with 6 knees in the same spot in his rib cage, and I'm just like, why don't I give it a shot going pro? What's the point of me just staying amateur and just hurting guys that are just new to the sport?
Sure. Well, you do get to that point. That's why I asked, when you see very seasoned amateurs, like you were saying, 11 amateur fights in the amateur world, that's a veteran of being amateur. So
and then for the very first time I fought in Myrtle Beach, I fought a guy who's been wrestling and having kickboxing competitions since I was a kid in high school with no training, and he was a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm just a blue belt, and I managed to take that guy out in 27 seconds at round 1 with the rear naked choke. So I just started realizing I feel like I'm wasting my time coming out and from fighting and coming out with no change in my pockets,
Sure.
Time to make something out of it.
Well, I think that makes perfect sense. Everybody has different reasons of when and the timing to go pro. Obviously, once you go pro, you can't go back, so you make the most of the fights.
I'm not too concerned about making it to the UFC or becoming UFC world champ or anything. 1FC will do for me, Bellator, whatever I can get, like I do have big goals, but I'm not gonna be, crazy about just going to the UFC. There's other promotions,
And I've been hearing that more and more when I talk to regional pro fighters like you, who are on their way up, that there used to be, and maybe some people still have the mindset UFC or bust, but in many ways that gives the UFC more power, because when you consider any of the bigger organizations, like you listed a couple of them, you keep your options open. You might end up with a better long-term contract. A lot of times when the UFC does disclose contracts, at least the young guys, guys that come in off UFC, Dana White looking for a contender, stuff like that, or the Tuesday night series, they're a much lower pay scale. And because, some people have that mindset. Now, you won your pro debut. What was that whole night like? Obviously, turning pro is a big deal. Getting your first pro fight is a big deal, but you came away with a victory, which had got to feel good. So what was that night like for you?
Oh, I'll tell you what was it like for me. I fought this guy who knocked somebody out in his very last amateur fight. He decided he wants to go pro, and then I just messaged Premier FC, and then they got me this guy, and I'm just like, you know what? That seems like a fair fight. Two debuters. I never knocked anyone out, but I do have a few more wins than him in the amateurs. And then, yeah, leading up to the weigh-ins, he was talking a little smack on his social media. I was still lurking the same night of the weigh-ins, and then that kind of drove me to come at him a little angrier and just demolish him. You know?
Well, that's the whole thing, whether it's Conor McGregor or somebody else. In the fight game, people are going to talk smack, but it all comes down to if they can back it up and what they can do in the cage, you know?
Yeah. We couldn't back it up.
Couldn't back it up. So obviously a great night for you, both
Yeah.
in shutting a guy up that was talking smack as well as getting you.
There's the other part. I didn't get paid. I was supposed to get paid $1,000.
Oh.
I did not get paid. And then after that card, I don't think Premier FC is ever going to run again because more than half of the fighters didn't get paid.
That is crazy. I appreciate you coming on and sharing that. Honestly, obviously on here, I have no way to know anything about that, but it does bring up, you know, when I talk about 247, and I've been following them since their first card in 19. I think it's always important to recognize that regional promotions, any promotion, particularly regional promotions that are honest and treat their fighters fairly and pay the pros. Obviously, that's a make or break right there. You know, you can't be fighting for promotions that aren't treating fighters honestly. Sometimes there are behind the scenes things, you know. So, but yeah, that is a shame, obviously, to hear that. At least you got to win. But yeah, it is a pain to make your pro debut.
Yeah, the whole reason I went pro was to get paid. Then I didn't get paid on my debut, the only one I won.
Yep. You did say you want to change in your pockets. Well, you are making that. Let's talk about July 9th. It's been on my calendar for a while. I'm super excited because anytime 247 puts on a card, they've produced a lot of great fighters from the ground up, as well as some really established guys that are already known in the area. So it's a great card, been around now for a few years. What led you to want to come down into the area? Do you know anything about Justin Patton? Is this a matchup you like, or is it just a fight and you don't really care about the matchup? You just want to keep staying busy?
No, I like the matchup because we both have we both have the same record. Mm-hmm. And the only odd part about it is like he fights a weight class above me. And I mean, at the moment, it's not that bad. I'm actually growing. I'm hitting my mid-20s. Like I turned 26 in August, and my body's going through weird changes. My back is getting wider and everything. Sure. All of a sudden, like I'm not getting any taller, but I'm just getting wider for some reason.
Okay, so have you guys agreed on the weight class up where he usually fights? I think he usually fights at 35, right?
Yeah, but he wants to fight at 140. He doesn't want to cut much weight. Okay, that's fine.
Gotcha. So obviously this has already been decided. I try to never be involved or talk about obviously some of the negotiations, but you're saying that the contract is at 140 catch weight. Okay, good, great. Because obviously there's a lot of behind the scenes things that happen. You're taking the fight at 140 catch weight. You mentioned that you're both 1 and 2 as pros. You won your debut. You lost 2 in a row coming into this card, this event. He lost his debut 1 and then also lost. So you're absolutely right. It's always good to see sort of equally matched at any level, because one fighter has to sort of take the step up and win and move on and kind of develop their game. And the other fighter obviously then has more work to do. What would you like to see? Not game planning, because I don't want to get into that too much, because obviously you've got a fight to win. But what would you like to see to make this trip down to Pittsburgh a success for you July 9th?
Well, what would I like to see? You know, I'm happy with the 2 nights of hotel, but I hope it comes with complimentary breakfast, because I don't want to go out there spending when I'm supposed to gain money, right? And my hand raised, you know.
Well, you keep it very simple. The hand raise obviously is the reason why
I don't want a 3-round war or anything. I just want to handle my business in round 1. You know, I'm just that fighter. You know. I don't prefer to keep it going for 3 rounds.
Well, I get that, but you do realize if you get in a 3-round war that I'm going to make that comment on the pay-per-view that you told me you didn't want to get in a 3-round war. So just know that's coming. If it happens to be a 3-round war, I'm going to say when he was on MMA Fancast, he told me this is not what he wanted to have happen. But
no worries.
But no, I mean, obviously it is important for you to continue developing your skill set. It's always exciting to hear about the mental as well as the physical transition from amateur to pro. You mentioned some of the amateur rule sets, particularly state by state, can have a wide variety. It must be nice to get to pros where there's really no variety. I guess there's occasionally foot stomp rules difference, a couple things here and there, but overall, how much nicer is it to know that generally speaking, the big issues, head kicks, knees, elbows, ground stuff is all legal? How does that feel training when you know the rule set's going to be set?
I feel free, because like back when I started fighting in the amateurs, I wasn't fighting in New York because it wasn't legal in New York.
Sure.
I just never knew if it would go on my record or not. And I was training at this local gym, like just close to me, close by where I live, and they like to spar with amateur rules. They're just like PA and New Jersey commissioner. They in that gym they fight. They don't allow head kicks while sparring, and they don't allow ground and pound to the head while sparring. Because all their fighters in that gym, they always fought for Dead Serious and Lou Neglia,
Mm-hmm.
And my first couple of amateur fights, like four of them were in like New Jersey and Pennsylvania. The debut was in Pennsylvania, actually. The 2300 arena. Everyone knows where that.
Yeah, I've been out there. Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about some really well-known, or at least decently well-known regional promotions in the Philly, New Jersey area.
Yeah.
I think up now in the New York, I'm pretty sure the last Dead Serious card I had a fighter on several years ago was up in New York since it got legalized.
Everyone prefers the head kicks and bare shins,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. You mentioned knee into the body as an amateur. I think you were still an amateur. That's one thing. I know they're not legal to the head in some states, but not all. I still think knees anywhere, like you proved, can be super devastating, but obviously they get even more devastating when they're to the head. It's been incredible having you on the show. Obviously, I always try to make sure when there's fights, particularly when fighters are coming from out of state, out of the area, to give them some coverage. So that way, it's not just a local guy getting the coverage. For anybody watching this, keep in mind that you can either make the trip and buy tickets, obviously, directly from you and make the trip down, because I think it is a reasonable trip, but there also will be a pay-per-view on 247fighting.com. And so hopefully you get some supporters and some people following this fight when you make the trip down.
So I want to give a shout out to Danny Flashinado Maldonado. That's like my big brother in the game, and he's fighting. He's actually the co-main event on the night.
Yeah, I was gonna say I saw him on the list. What's it like for you to have like a big brother type figure on the same card with you?
Dude, I just go to him for any advice, and that dude's an animal. Like, people look at his record and that throws him off, but that means nothing. When they actually fight him in the cage, they know who he is at that point,
That's a very great comment to make about a buddy and a brother of yours. I think that goes a lot in the regional pro circuit.
No, I'm not even being biased. Like, if he actually sucked, I would have said, "Oh, Danny sucks." But this guy, like, I watched the fights. His losses were all for stupid reasons.
Yeah.
An opponent grabbing the fence and using it to put him in a triangle lock and elbowing him in the back of the head. Another one, right when he attempts to touch gloves in round one, he just flying knees him and breaks his nose. It's like stupid stuff like that causes his losses. Another one had poked him in the eye and gave him a nut shot, and then TKO, and then put him in a triangle. It's just weird stuff.
Wow, that's about as bad of a run of
fuck, man.
Yeah, most of them being either intentionally bad things, sort of on the DQ variety, or the freak stuff that can happen in fighting. I do think it's always important for fans when they're going to regional cards, just like you pointed out, to recognize that there can be a ton of talent, a lot of incredible fighters, from the amateur debuters all the way up to the seasoned pros. And sometimes it's easy to look at records, particularly the pro fighters that are 500, little under 500 in that range, and think that means that they don't have the skills to make it. But oftentimes they do. They just got to figure out what works, what style works for them. In Danny's case, obviously you pointed out three fights right there that was more about sort of bad things happening that were out of his control. But still, it's been great having you on the card. I do hope to have Danny on the show to talk about making the trip and obviously being on 247.
Yeah. And as an amateur, he was a 2-time champ. He had quite a big resume.
Yeah, it is. How long have you been training with him? Is he in your gym, or is he just a buddy of yours?
No, he's we're training in the same gym, King's Combat Williamsburg in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a good Muay Thai gym, and then the grappling coach is John Calistine. If you heard of him, he's a pretty famous grappler. He's known worldwide in the grappling world.
That's incredible. I always find it interesting to see how local gyms oftentimes specialize in one martial art, and then because of MMA, they have to round it out. The Mat Factory, and this is a compliment, the Mat Factory in Pittsburgh is obviously very well known in Pittsburgh, and it came from the mats, it came from wrestling, but obviously
I was about to say that sounds like a wrestling gym.
Yeah, it was a wrestling gym, and then it built up everything else around. You're mentioning King's Gym is the name.
Yeah, King's Combat.
King's Combat was very much Muay Thai, which is obviously wonderful. And then they brought the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu in. Yes, and I think in many ways it's good for gyms to know their strength and then bring in somebody to complement their strength. Like you mentioned, a well-known wrestling jiu-jitsu coach. So it's always exciting to see kind of the roots of gyms, because if people don't know, before MMA became a thing 25 years ago, or even more recent than that, gyms were much more specialized, and now they've had to become more general practitioners because of MMA. Yeah, well, you got to a list of your gratitude. You got to a list of your shout outs. I always try to give people the opportunity. So you've talked about your coaches, your gym, and Danny Maldonado. Do you have anybody else that you want to say shout outs to before we wrap up?
No, for tonight, that'll be it. The gym, the coach, and then Danny. That's it.
Yeah, that's a good checklist right there. Well, I can't wait to meet you in person, and I'm even more excited to see you when you step in the cage. Braun the Berg 12. It's going to be hashtag BITB12 on social media. Can't wait to see you in action July 9th. Remember, get your tickets for pay-per-view on 247fighting.com or in person from you, and then Meadows Casino. Thanks so much for coming on. You take care. Have a good night.
Have a good night, bud.
All right. Bye-bye.